Hello, Milwaukee Bucks fans. Welcome back to another episode of Bucks Latest presented by Fan Arch. As always, I'm your host, Dean Simon. And before we get into everything, please make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, and subscribe. We are still very much on the road to 1,000 subscribers, but we are knocking on the door, and I can't believe we're getting there so soon. But please, if you want to, press that big red subscribe button down below. Also, turn on post notifications so you don't miss future episodes. All right, so we've talked a lot in previous episodes about how the Bucks are going to manage their lineups and certain rotations and how Doc Rivers is kind of going to play around with the different pieces that he has and the guys that he has now brought back, including Ryan Rollins, who I'm going to be very intrigued to see how Doc kind of places him in different actions and different rotations. But Ryan Rollins, Torian Prince, Gary Trent Jr., Kevin Porter Jr., how much of an impact these guys specifically are going to have, and whether they'll all be included in different starting lineups at certain points in the season. It's, more or less a conclusion that they will. But on opening night, we still don't necessarily know the exact lineup configuration that the Bucks are going to go with. But Zach Lowe of the Zach Lowe Show is it's always a great listen. But he was talking about the Bucks and their starting lineup in a recent episode, and he was just voicing his not necessarily concern, but just how unpredictable this could be in terms of who the Bucks and Doc Rivers decide to go with. And he basically said that his words that I don't even know who the starting lineup for this team is other than Giannis and Myles Turner, and I guess Kuzma by default has to start. It could be any combination of Kevin Porter Jr., Ryan Rollins, Gary Trent, AJ Green, and Cole Anthony. Oh wait, messed that up. And Cole Anthony will come off the bench. Portis will come off the bench. Okay, no, I did not mess that up. But basically, alleging that Giannis and Myles Turner are going to be the starting front court, as is widely known, but also saying that Kyle Kuzma has to start by default. I don't necessarily agree with that. In fact, I am of the opposing mindset where I feel like maybe going into this year, it would be more beneficial to have a guy like Kyle Kuzma coming off of a terrible season. Maybe it's better for him to come off the bench when, specifically when he's had experience of being a very impactful bench player or mainly bench player on a championship team in 2020. It feels like it makes more sense to me to start him off on the bench, maybe be the seventh man on this team or eighth man or so, and kind of give him a chance to settle back into things as a guy getting maybe 20 to 22 minutes a night and not necessarily putting all of the burden on him to be your starting three immediately. And again, just kind of put that weight on his shoulders of, you have to have a better season. But then again, can't really go much worse than it did for his tenure with the Milwaukee Bucks through the second half of last year and then into the postseason. It can really only go up from here. But I feel like it's just, you're looking past this very quickly and not really giving it much thought if you're thinking Kyle Kuzma has to start by default. There are other options you can go to. You can start Torian Prince at the three. You can start even it's been a subject also of recent videos that Amir Coffey, though he is strictly a training camp contract guy right now, he might be one of the Bucks' best options on the wing. And I don't think it's improbable that Amir Coffey might start several games for the Milwaukee Bucks as their starting small forward this year. And that could be due to injury and certain guys missing time, but it's possible. So there are other options, maybe not the best at the small forward position in the world, but enough to where you can justify Kyle Kuzma coming off the bench and kind of just being able to come into his own again, coming off the bench, not really being relied upon as much as one of the Bucks' go-to scorers. I feel like just putting that kind of pressure on him from the beginning, it might not lead to the best results. So that's really what I'm looking for. Is that you don't need to start Kyle Kuzma. It's not a definite that has to happen. But moving forward, we're going to talk a little bit about the Bucks bringing in Myles Turner, waiving and stretching Damian Lillard, but not just the moves themselves, but the the effort and the lengths at which the Bucks front office and John Horst go to make sure that Giannis has at least a semblance of a competitive team. Of course, waiving and stretching Damian Lillard, one of the greatest scorers at the point guard position of all time, maybe a top 10, 15 point guard of all time. That's of course going to hurt your team, and then eating up all of that money is not going to be good for you in the short term future, and especially with Giannis still on the roster and trying to make the most of what you can with Giannis on the roster. But it's really something when most in the media and most NBA pundits and things like that, they don't really take into account that while the move of waiving and stretching Damian Lillard was as drastic as they come, bringing in Myles Turner was the most unexpectedly positive move, arguably, of the offseason. Bringing him in immediately to replace Brooke Lopez in that kind of 3 and D shot blocking, floor spacing center role, and he's just younger and more athletic, and now has NBA Finals experience. I feel like that move is kind of getting undersold as one of the best moves of the offseason. And the Athletics' David Aldridge, he is not necessarily of the opinion that Myles Turner is going to be coming in and making all of this difference, that Myles Turner is the best thing for the Milwaukee Bucks, or the best player that they could have gotten, or that it could have been the best result for their offseason. But he did go to a length to at least acknowledge that the Bucks do whatever they can with the assets that they have and in the position that they're in to build somewhat of a competitive team. And these are his words. You can't say that the Bucks don't turn over every stone to keep Giannis Antetokounmpo happy. They've burned through much of their future draft stock, they've cycled through coaches, they've traded impact players, and now they're setting $113 million on fire by waiving Lillard and stretching his contract to be able to sign Turner. Turner's a great fit, and he's 8 years younger than Lopez, and it was easier cutting Lillard knowing he's likely to miss the season, and Cole Anthony will pick up some of the slack. So it's good to recognize that John Horst he's not just standing pat, or sitting on his hands and not really offering to make any kind of move to make Giannis happy. If this were a different GM, or a different kind of front office staff, they could have grossly mishandled this situation in the way of not getting any other kind of player to assist Giannis on a potential deep postseason run, and especially a guy that fits, or will likely fit so seamlessly with what the Milwaukee Bucks want to do, and with the kind of front court partner at the center position that Giannis likes to play with. There's no way you can really look at this offseason for the Bucks and think, with the assets that they have, they just didn't really make enough of an effort. They evidently went to drastic measures to, at least in their view, improve this team enough to where you can maybe conceive the Bucks making somewhat of a deep postseason run. It might come to fruition, it might not, but you can't knock John Horst for trying to make moves, even if they end up being wildly unconventional. You still landed a great player, Myles Turner, that can elevate a good team to a great team, and we saw as much in the 2025 playoffs, not necessarily in the NBA Finals themselves, but throughout the Pacers' improbable NBA Finals run. Okay, so next up, AJ Green on the agenda. Of course, all the extension talks. That's it remains to be seen what happens, or what comes out of that. But I think this was one of the more interesting takes with regard to AJ Green that I saw recently. So William Moxon from Fansided came out with an article, and then in the midst of all of these AJ Green extension talks, and what is going to be of his short term future, nobody really knows. But in the midst of all this, William Moxon came out with an article, basically trying to convince AJ Green to learn from, or read from the playbook of Gary Trent Jr. and develop a step back jump shot. And with regard to AJ Green's skill set, of course, it's not necessarily what he's known for, is shooting threes off the dribble, and pound dribbles into step back threes. It's not AJ Green's game. He's strictly catch and shoot. And with the way that his jump shot mechanics work, it's pretty easy to see that he's not necessarily a guy. I'm not saying that he can't develop as a jump shooter off the dribble, but with the way that his jump shot works, the hand kind of over the ball, and not really, it's not very great in terms of flowing within dribble sequences and being able to get to that kind of unconventional jump shot. Um, you know, Not saying he can't improve, but he said that he should learn from Gary Trent Jr. And his words, on step back jump shots, Green shot just 29.2% in the 2024-25 regular season. Teammate Gary Trent Jr. can be an example for him to follow, with his ability to create his own shot, such as with step backs, elevating his importance to the team. Opposing teams will be more aware than ever of Green's ability and will do everything to keep him quiet. You know, while I don't necessarily disagree with the prospect of AJ Green developing a step back jumper, I feel like what also goes into that are handles. And um, AJ Green has solid enough handles to justify him being on the court as a elite catch and shoot threat. to where he can put the ball on the floor if needed and make something out of his drives to the basket. But Gary Trent Jr.'s ball handling, I feel like, is massively underrated, and just his ball handling is just much further along than AJ Green's. And again, AJ Green's so young, and there's time for him to develop in all of these key areas. But in the right now, in the in the present, excuse me, Gary Trent Jr. is much further along with his ball handling. AJ Green is most likely just going to be sticking to a catch and shoot role, especially with the way that the Bucks are going to be looking to increase their three-point attempts and really have an uptick in that category. They're just going to be wanting AJ Green to catch and release, and that's going to be the extent of his responsibilities on the offensive end of the floor. Again, not saying that he can't take his time to work on certain aspects of his offensive game and how he gets to his three-point jump shot, but going into a very, very pivotal season in recent Bucks history, of course, coming off of all these first round exits and bringing in Myles Turner. Now, in the post Damien Lillard era, nothing is really set in stone, and it's going to be so unpredictable. You're just going to want a guy like AJ Green to catch and release, and I feel like that's what we're going to be seeing mostly from him. He might surprise us. He might end up developing in those key areas, but it just still remains to be seen. But last thing that I wanted to talk about is regarding Giannis and this ESPN poll that was recently released, where they surveyed a bunch of people and they asked a bunch of different questions, a myriad of different questions, like who will win MVP this year, who will be the best team this year, who do you think is going to win each conference, things like that. And then also included in that list of questions was who do you think is the best player in the world? And I don't necessarily disagree with the outcome, or at least the singular player that was voted as the best player in the world. I just feel like the way in which we got to that point was very askew. So it ended up being that Nikola Jokic got 18 votes for best player in the world, and the next player, he almost won it unanimously. The next player to receive any vote was Luka Doncic with one singular vote. That means both Giannis and also the MVP of the league and reigning finals MVP, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, did not receive a single vote to be the best player in the world. And I've seen several articles talking about this, the aftermath from this one ESPN poll, saying that it is completely inconceivable to think that Giannis and Nikola Jokic are this far off, that Nikola Jokic is this much better, that there's this much of a gap to justify him getting 18 votes and Giannis not getting a singular vote, and Giannis being shut out from best player in the world conversations, especially when Giannis is a top 3 consensus MVP finalist year in and year out, 30, 12, and 6 a game. And those assists are probably going to see an uptick as well, shooting 60% from the floor. It's not like there is this huge gap because, Nikola Jokic is a generational passing talent from the center position. But from a scoring, from a rebounding perspective, um, it's not like there's that much separation. And when you factor in that Giannis is one of the best defenders in the world year in and year out, it doesn't really compute to me how these guys could be seen or viewed as this far apart. Doesn't really make sense, but this is just par for the course for the media to kind of be shutting Giannis out of these kinds of conversations. And hopefully he ends up proving everybody wrong and goes on a crazy MVP run and establishes himself once again as very possibly the best player in the world. But anyways, that'll be it for me today. Thank you very much for tuning into another episode of Bucks Latest presented by Fan Arch. Again, I've been Dean Simon. Make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, tell me what you thought below, and also subscribe. Again, still on the road to 1,000 subscribers, so really trying to hit that milestone. Please subscribe if you feel like it. All right, I will see you guys in the next one. Go Bucks.